Hello, welcome to my new series, Capturing Winter. If you're new here, hi, I'm Catherine, this is my studio, and in this video I want to capture the fragility of winter leaves. So I've been picking them over the last few weeks, and you don't even have to pick them, you can sometimes just find them on the ground, and you find them with these very beautiful patterns. And I think this is one of my favourites. I've already printed with that one, you can see it's got paint on. I don't know why, but the leaves that I found, that you find this in most often, seems to be hazel leaves like these, and either sycamore or maple. I always have trouble telling them apart. I thought the best way to try and capture them was by printing with them, and because they're quite delicate, first of all I've used a glycerin treatment, and I'll link the video up here where I show you. It's a really easy process. You just have to dunk them in a mixture for a couple of days, and it adds moisture into the leaf and makes it much more supple and quite robust. You see that one, that's got paint on the back, and I've used that for several different prints, and sometimes little bits start falling off, but I don't think that matters because I've been trying to just capture that really beautiful delicate tracery. And although I'm doing jelly printing, which is similar to another video I did, I just called it Print Your Garden. It's using a jelly plate and acrylic paint, but I've used it in a slightly different way, and it's made these very, I think, rather beautiful luminous prints. And I decided to keep it quite monochrome, and I've tried different papers. So sometimes I've used tissue paper, which I love to print on because it's wonderful to collage with, because when you attach it onto something else, the paper almost disappears and it becomes part of the background, so it's lovely to collage with. And another thing I've used is calligraphy paper, which is quite cheap. You can buy it online, and I think it's mostly just used for it's called calligraphy paper for practice. So it's strong, but still quite, it's not quite as translucent as tissue, but it is quite delicate, so it's nice to use on. You will find once or twice with the tissue paper that it does tear a little bit as you're pulling it off, so I think I need to get hold of some wet strength tissue paper because that's supposed to be really good. And I've also recently got hold of some glassine paper, so I'm going to do some experiments with that. But I found the tissue paper and the calligraphy paper worked really well. And you can sort of, I don't know if you can see against the light, if I hold it up against the light, that particularly with the tissue paper, let me find one that was done on tissue paper, it's so translucent that you can almost see through it, and I just think that gives a really beautiful effect. So I'll give you a demonstration of how I made these. The leaves that I picked have been soaking in glycerin for 2 or 3 days and then rinsed in water, and just before I use them, the night before, I will weigh them down with some books just to get them nice and even and flat. For this first print I'm using Payne's grey, and I'm putting a nice even layer onto my jelly plate. And I'm putting the leaves on, and I'm using a piece of tissue paper, and it's really good because because it's so thin, you can get into all the interesting crevices, so you get a really good imprint on it. I didn't actually register this piece, which is when you use tape or something, so you know you're going to get it in exactly the same place. But it got some nice detail. I just used an iridescent paint, I think it's just called Iridescent White, and I decided after I'd done this print that it didn't come out that well. I think because I didn't register it. Also, I think I used too much paint on the plate in the first place. So that one hasn't come out very well, but I thought I'd show you it. So this time I'm using a little bit less paint on the plate, but exactly the same process. But I think this time I remembered to put some tape on, so I'll be able to put it back in exactly the same place. There, that's me doing that. So getting all the little details. And you can see the detail of that quite well. So again, I'm using the iridescent paint, but putting a thinner layer on. Peeling off, you have to be really careful. You see, I tore a little bit then. As I say, I need to get hold of some wet strength tissue and try with that. So now I'm using a mixture of the Payne's grey and black. I've registered the paper with my masking tape. And I'm using the calligraphy paper for this, so it's a little bit stronger. You still have to be careful, but it's more robust than the tissue paper. And I'm just using white paint this time. Yes, pleased with that one. That's got a lot of nice detail. I'm changing my palette and using a colour called, I think it's called Terre Rouge. And it is a really earthy sort of reddish brown. And I've learnt now to use really thin layers and using the calligraphy paper again. I didn't peel the paper all the way off, and so it's because it's still sticking to the edge of the plate, I should be able to get a perfect match. You do sometimes get little wrinkles in the paper when you use finer paper, and this might not bother you. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. What I do occasionally is just fill in the gaps, because otherwise you'll be left with sort of fine white lines. So I do fill them in with some colouring pencil sometimes afterwards. Now I'm going back to the Payne's grey and black. I think I had a bit too much paint on this time. And I don't know why I used two separate pieces. I think that was what I had to hand. It's always a good idea to have your paper sort of in a pile, ready, prepared before you start. So you can see again that it's still sticking to the edge of the plate, and I think I did that as much as possible from then on. And I'm using a mixture of white with a little bit of iridescence. I think just using the iridescent paint was just too much, made it too shiny. I'm going for a sort of glowy effect rather than really shiny. And I think those have come out pretty well, particularly the one on the right. Now I'm using a green called, I think it's called Olive Light Green, a very goldeny green. And I've mixed a little bit of iridescent blue green in with it as well, just for interest. And this is the calligraphy paper. And I'm just using white to pick it up because I've already got some iridescence in it and a very thin layer. What you're not seeing is that I'm waiting for it to dry completely before peeling off the final layer. And now I'm going in with Turquoise, one of my favourite colours. And you do sometimes get a few bits that get stuck behind. I usually try and wait for the paint to dry and then use my finger or tweezers or something to get the bits off. So using a very thin layer of white to take these prints off. As I went on, I almost used less and less paint just to see what I could do. And I think the less I used, the more sort of glowy and luminous it looked. And I was just really pleased with that effect. So this preferred choice now of mostly white with a little bit of iridescent white mixed in. And using it very sparingly. I tried using a ruler that time to see if it would get rid of the creases, but as you can see, it didn't really work. I actually think using the flat of your hand is a better way of doing it. Going back to the Terre Rouge, but a very, very thin layer. You do have to work too much, and I wasn't able to get a good print. I think so this is using tissue paper again, and as you saw, you have to be very careful because it is fragile. And I think the leaves are getting a bit more worn now. It's amazing how robust they are once you've used the glycerin solution on them. But yes, you can see with the flat of your hand, you actually get better contact than using something like the ruler. I think I probably left too much in contact with the plate for that one, which is why you've got that stripe at the top. So going back to the olive green light. So I think I try to peel this back a little bit more. Depends how you're going to use the prints. I mean, I might be cutting out some of these leaves altogether, so it doesn't really matter what the surround looks like. Being very careful that I've picked everything up and peeling it. I think I waited a bit longer for it to dry. I think just using the olive green on its own, olive green light, it was a bit too yellowy. And then this little section I actually filmed after I'd filmed the intro, so I am using the glassine paper that I mentioned. And it's quite shiny. I wasn't sure how well it would take the paint. But as it was more robust, I decided to, rather than use 2 layers, just to move quickly and do it all in one go. And because the paper is shiny, it does give that sort of iridescence and glow that I've been after. So now trying it with the blue-green colour, really thin layer. And also this paper was very easy to stick to the plate, so I could easily register it. So I was really pleased with that, and I'm definitely going to do some more with the glassine paper. I think I just did this last print with some darker paint just to see how it would look. Yes, I really like the effect of that. So I hope you found that helpful. Please ask any questions. I love getting comments, so ask away. And I've got 1 or 2 ideas about what I'm going to do with these prints, and because we've got this lovely translucency, and when you hold them against the light you do get a lovely effect, that what I'm thinking of doing, I've got this old rather knackered lampshade that's seen better days, so I'm going to see if I can apply them and make a lampshade out of them, because I think it will look rather pretty with the light shining through. So if that works out, that will be my next video, so I hope you join me for that.